Hello! I am Mudita, and welcome back to Satisfactory. The last video was the start of Phase 5. I built a number of small factories to produce the new fixite trigons and time crystals. The other factories increased my plastic, rubber, quartz crystal, silica, and deuterium ingots. Today, I'm going to continue to increase my production of the more basic materials. My first aluminum factory has been working great and still has a few hundred ingots still available. However, here in Phase 5, I'm going to need a few thousand more. I'll be heading to the swamp and gathering all 3,000 bauxite and 1,800 copper ore. I'll turn these into 3,000 aluminum ingots and 4,500 copper ingots to be used in these next projects. Today we're starting off at the Eastern Dune Forest train station. Right over to this side has been my first aluminum factory, and it's been taking 1,800 bauxite and turning that into 1,800 aluminum ingots. Unfortunately, this is pretty much all I've got left. 327 on one, 256 on another, and then one last one that has 100 even. And that is just not going to be enough. So let's go ahead and jump in the train. In between videos, I decided to extend the train line out to the swamp, but there's no train station there yet. So I have to do a little bit of manual driving, and let's hope I don't run into something. Here we are, everyone's favorite biome, the swamp. Thought it would be a good idea to have the train tracks just run all the way across the swamp, so I tried to keep things as straight as I could. But eventually I did need it to turn a little bit so that we could eventually go up. And then of course I'm just going to squeeze the train line straight through there. Why wouldn't I want to? Oh, look at that pristine desert. There are so many resources that I just have not touched at all yet. One day, not today, I will end up taking that train line and connecting it from here over to where it ends right over there. But for right now, having it run straight through the middle of the swamp is all I really need. The first step is going to be building a train station, or at least the rough outline of it. It's easiest to work with a straight section, so I think doing it over here is probably going to be easier than doing it over there. So I'm thinking the intersection will be right about here, which is like right after it kind of drops down. So yeah, I think this area looks nice and open. And most of the resources are actually kind of on the outside. I just have to make sure that I don't build right on top of that copper node because I am going to use it. The one great thing about the swamp is it's pretty much the one biome I just don't feel bad about just leveling. And if I kill a couple spiders while I'm at it, hey, I'm not complaining. First step is adding the intersection. And I think I'm just going to have it be right on top of the copper node as long as I have enough clearance. Even when I add my little housing, I'll still have plenty of clearance. Alright, so I need to add a T intersection. So the way I like to do it is the distance in between pretty much all of these gaps are going to be 12 foundations. That means if I find the middle mark, I can bring this out 5 and 5. And now I should have basically a 5 gap there, 5 there, and this should go up to 15. There we go. So they will all be equal distance. And then I just need to grab one of these blueprints, and I can just leave it in default mode, get it lined up. And now I can just make all of my rail connections. So we just make sure that we get the right ones connected to where they need to go. We get both of those on that side, both of these on this side. The rule of thumb with intersections is path in and block out. So all of the ones on the right are going to be path signals. So that one, and that one. Alright, now with those changed, to make the intersections run a little bit smoother, I want to delete the closest block signal, because to trigger the path signal, it needs to cross the signal before it. So now, it'll cross it over there, and that will trigger the path signal that it needs to go through here. And then I'll do the same thing on this side. This way the trains won't have to slow down as much as they're approaching the intersection. So now let me get to leveling the forest here and placing a whole bunch of foundations. And I'm going to build a train station just over this whole area, I think. Too many explosives. Apparently the game didn't like me laying down as many cluster nobles as I did, and it crashed. But I was able to level the forest, and now I have a gigantic train station here in the middle of the swamp. I mentioned it in the last video, but the train stations have really kind of become my logistics hub of the area, because I give them a pretty decent amount of space underneath usually, be able to do my load balancing and all the fun ratio splits, and then kind of send them out where they need to go. If I'm just going to have one train station out here, might as well make it a decent size. I really don't think I'm going to use this much. This is a direct result of the different issues I've had with my other train stations. So let me explain why it's so big. The large majority of the time, I only have one train stopping at a train station. But I do have a couple train stations that have multiple trains stop there. And thankfully I've been able to space things out, and I really haven't run into the issue. But I do know it's possible. This distance right here is the same distance as this. So I can have a locomotive and 4 freight cars stop here. If a second train also is going to stop here and use this train station, as long as it's not longer than 5 train sections long, it'll be able to fit within this gap, meaning it won't overhang here, leaving this block signal green. So when I have another train station, it won't get blocked and traffic will be able to continue to flow. This right here is a really good idea if you're going to have multiple trains use the same train station. A number of my train stations don't have this much space, and so they could have more traffic issues. And so I wanted to build this one with that in mind. Here's the intersection that I built. The trains will just come in this way, and then come into the backside of the train station, and then they'll come in this way, and then they'll leave out that. For now, I've got my train station and then one other one. When I need more, I'll add them, but for now, I know I'll eventually need one. And just to try to give myself the most amount of space, I was going to try to keep the train stations kind of tight together. So since I only ever really need a train station, I don't need any freight platforms. I could build this train station nice and close. And then as long as I don't have the freight platforms, I don't have to worry about these floor holes clipping through anything. Now that I have train stations, that means I have power. So I'm going to throw down a radar tower here. I do love the radar towers. I can now see all of the resources in the swamp here. This is the copper node that the train line is running just right over. There's the pure, and then here is the normal, so that's my 1800. For the bauxite, we've got an impure, a normal, and a pure. And then on this side of the swamp, we've got a normal and an impure. I'll be able to combine those now that I have Mark 6 belts and just have that 900 come along here. I really like the cartograph mod. The only downside is now it takes a few minutes to completely initialize. So sometimes it just takes a while to add everything. But the train station is right here, and then the factory, I think it's just going to go right down here. And there's one last thing that I need to make all of this work, and it's this down here. I'll need this crude oil well. It's all impure nodes, but there's enough of them to get 450 crude oil if you completely overclock it. So just as little placeholders, I'm going to go around and place the miners on all of the nodes that I need, just to kind of get an idea of where everything is and where things are going to go. And then we're going to head over to the corner of the swamp, and we're going to start with the crude oil. Now I've got my miners placed. We got that copper, the 2 bauxite, the 3 bauxite, and the 1 copper. Now I just need to clear out some of this rubbish around the crude oil. Now the downside with the resource well pressurizer It needs power. And I haven't brought power over here. Obviously, I could just run a line over here. It'd be pretty easy. And I think I've only ever laid out my resource well pressurizers in one way, where I kind of elevate something and then I place the little nodes on here, and then I bring the pipes up. And I really like doing it that way because most of the resource wells just aren't even. For some of the nodes, they're built in kind of weird areas, and so one node may be like 10 meters taller than another one. That was my way of getting everything onto the same level, and then from there, the pipe work was a lot easier. But I'm going to change things up a little bit for this one. But like I said, I need to power it on before I can place those things, so I'll show you what that looks like a little bit later. For now, let's just come right over here and build the factory. But before we get into that, let's go over the plan. Like with most factories, my original plan got changed. I was going to do just a singular tower like I've done in most of the other places. And that's how I was going to break up the floors. I would do the copper at the bottom, coke in the middle, and then the aluminum at the very top. I am still going to do a tower, but I'm going to remove that middle floor. The petroleum coke is just going to get its own building now. And that's the part that I'm going to work on here. So with 450 crude oil, I'm going to use the heavy oil residue alternate. That'll get turned into 600 heavy oil residue, which then I can directly turn into 1800 petroleum coke. For today's aluminum project, I only need 1200 of that. Besides making more aluminum down the line, there are quite a few alternate recipes that can utilize that petroleum coke. And that's why I'm making all of the petroleum coke out of here that I can. Instead of 15 machines for each, I can completely overclock it and bring it down to 6. I need 2 sets of 6 refineries, and I think there should be just enough space to do it all. So we've got an 8 by 8. And I already know that if I have 6 refineries, they are 1 1/4 foundations each. So I've got 8 foundations, and I'm going to use 7.5 of it. Which also means, because I do love my symmetry, I'm going to make sure that I start here in the middle instead of at either one of the sides. So we're going to place that one there, and then 2 more. We've got the 6 on this side. Let's go ahead and set this recipe. So this is going to be doing the heavy oil residue, and like I said, completely overclocking these. And then here on the other side, we're just going to do them in a straight line, and I could do them just right next to each other. And even though it's only 1 foundation, and it's not a lot of space, I think it'll be enough. So this one, I'm actually going to do it the easy way, and let's go ahead and set the recipe first. So we can just switch this to petroleum coke, completely overclock. Each of these refineries output 100 heavy oil residue. That'll intake it and give you 300 petroleum coke. We can go ahead and spam these 6 down. Since these are doing heavy oil residue, let's repaint these purple. And this factory is great because this is pretty much all I need. Just 1 pipe in between the 2 refineries. And I know I say this like every time, but this is definitely my favorite way to deal with pipes. If you can make it so it's just a direct connection from one machine to the next, it is so much easier than grouping everything together and then resplitting it up. For the input side, I just need to deal with the crude oil. So we'll just basically have a manifold like this, using the good old straight mode. And the great thing about this is at a lower elevation than the oil. And so definitely don't need any pumps. And I think it would be best if we just plug that just right in the middle. So this would be the very center. Let's move it over by 1. If I rotate it up, there we go. So now using horizontal to vertical, this is where that pipe is going to come from, but we'll figure that part out later. The last 2 parts I need to deal with are obviously the petroleum coke. Each machine is outputting 300, so I'm just going to group up 3 together. So we've got 900 here, 900 here. Now, there is one more output I do need to deal with. And for that, I'm just going to smash this merger just right up next to the other one. Because with this, we're still going to have plenty of wiggle room on the belts, so I think it'll be fine. Just got to make sure that's a Mark 6, because that's going to be 900. And it's these guys right here. Besides the heavy oil residue, they're also outputting 50 polymer resin each. So what I'm going to do is just place a merger here. And then I'm going to get these grouped up together. And then I'm just going to have this come around here and then plug into here. So for, I'll just try to make this actually look good. And that way it'll have these three, and then I'm going to do the same thing with these three, and they're going to get looped around this way and plug into this one. And then from here in the very center, let's go ahead and find it. I'm going to run a belt line that's going to go this way and then off to the train station, and that's where I'm going to sink it because that's also where I'll end up doing my load balancing. And then the 1200 will then go to the aluminum factory, which will probably be right over here. But that way I'll have the polymer resin and the extra coke already at the train station. I'll have 2 belts heading to the train station. Each one will have 900 coke and then 150 polymer resin. For the petroleum coke part of this whole thing, that's it. It is super simple, and that's why I love using this set of alternates for the aluminum. Creating petroleum coke is obviously more steps than bringing in coal, but it's really easy to do. One of the things I found really funny about my last video when I was going through editing them, I was so excited with the Trigon Tower to build that blueprint where I had a whole 3 or 4 batteries built in. And then I decided to just not add any batteries to any of the other factories. And I thought that was kind of funny because sure, it's 4 batteries I didn't have before, but really kind of helps if you just keep doing that instead of only doing it once. So today I'm going to fix that and we're going to add a lot of batteries. So of course, I came up with a new blueprint. So let me walk you through a little bit of the thought process here. Adding a little bit of the depth to the build is always nice to switch things up from just having just a smooth rectangle of a factory. And I was thinking the corner would be a good place to do it. And that way I could have the windows kind of set in a little bit. The corners would stick out and add that depth. And that would be an interesting place to add some of my batteries. All right, so what if we say we've got our corner right here? And I want to build something on the side. So what if I just grab my 1 meter here. And then I grab my power storage. And then we'll just center this right on the foundation and just get it pressed up right against the wall. So yeah, that's fine. I'll probably end up placing a foundation right there and it'll be completely covered. So I'll do that for both of the side pieces. But the corner piece is going to be a little bit different, because then I would have to pick a side, which is fine. But I also think it would look cool if I just shifted it 45 degrees. So if I place that, we'll just delete that for a second. That way I can place this one. And then we'll just go back as far as I can. I think that's right where, yeah, that's right where they touch. Nice and even. Good enough for me. So now I'll delete that foundation and replace the other one. So it's in line with the other two. I like that look better. And now I'll switch this one to a 2 meter. And I'll do basically the exact same thing. And then that way, when I place this one here, this one will go back to a 1 meter on the very top. And that way, since this one has a 1 meter and then this one ends in a 1 meter, but the very middle one's a 2 meter, if I stack these on top of each other, it'll be really even. So that is my thought process. And that idea turned into this. So just what I showed you, I just added the high barriers here and then some corner road barriers. But with these, I nudge them in a 1/2 meter because normally where they sit would be right there is where they normally snap onto the foundations, and then they overhang by half. And I wasn't crazy about that. So if you just nudge it holding control, you can do it the 1/2 meter. And I would just have a tiny bit of a gap on the other side, but I like that look much better. And then here on the sides, I've got the outer corner extensions. And then this right here, I'm probably going to continue out and have that be part of my wall. Or at least that's what I'm planning on kind of building off of. And then this right here is the corner piece. And I have all of these connected already, because pretty much all the wires are hidden, which is nice. The great thing about this is all I need to do to place them is just delete a corner. And then I just get it close, press H to lock it in place, and then just nudge. So once I get it all lined up, now I can use page down and get it to the right spot. And that should be lined up with the bottom of that foundation. And my plan is to double stack these. So even though I could make a shorter roof and do it like I do a lot of times where I just kind of cut through the smokestacks or let them out, I'm actually just going to make this one taller because it gives me an excuse to build more batteries. Because the power connections stick up, when I put it in blueprint mode, it's 1 meter too tall. So from here, all I need to do is hit page down once, and it fits great. Now, the one downside to this blueprint right here is it needs 600 wire for each one. Everything else in my dimensional depot will keep up just fine. The wire, however, this is pretty much the only time where I need more dimensional depots. It's when I plan on building a bunch of power storage. But that's the excuse I needed, because if I look in my storage here, I've got 41 Mercer spheres, and they really only have one use. I am not going to run into 41 new items that I need to send to my dimensional depot. A better use would be going back to my factories and adding a couple more to my existing setups. So before I finish this, because I know I'm going to end up having to wait to be able to place these, I'm going to jump in my train, and the large majority of production is being done right out here in the Rocky Desert. I'll have to do a little bit of traveling to some other ones to increase their production, but this is pretty much all of the iron, the wire, all of the basic materials are being produced out here. So let me hop in my train, and I'll see you when I get out there. The good old Rocky Desert. I really thought I would build a bunch of stuff out here and then rarely ever come back. But I happen to come back out here pretty often, it seems. This one, and this one are all just space elevator parts, so there's nothing to upgrade there. I already checked, and my steel beams is pretty much the only one where I have 3 already on there. I've had it, I think, since the get-go. And I don't think I've ever had a problem running out of steel beams. But if we turn around, most of what I need to upgrade, then these 2 right here, and then that one off in the distance that there's just no convenient way to get to. When my starter base was right over there, it was just so close and convenient. And now that I've expanded and started to rely on trains more, there's no train station over there. Whoops. So we'll just have to leg it. Oh boy, haven't been in here in a while. And I honestly didn't realize that I don't even have a dimensional depot for screws. Hey, look at that. It's not auto-refilling. Guess I just never noticed. I mean, who really needs that many screws? Iron plates, we've got 3. Let's go ahead and increase the rods, the pipes, the cable, most importantly the wire. And sure, why not reinforce iron plates too? And make sure we get a Mark III lift on all of these. Now this finally looks how I always intended it to. Let's do the same thing to the other factories. Okay, if I'm being realistic, I really doubt that I even need a second one on rotors or motors, but we're going to do a second one. I think the third may be a bit overkill. Having 3 industrial storage is definitely overkill for these. And last factory that's way out here I need to check on. I don't even remember exactly what's being made. I guess it's only these 2. For some reason I thought I was making more than just the modular frames and encased industrial beams, but hey, those can both get 2. Why not? Those were the important and farthest ones from the train station I needed to check on. Like I mentioned, the steel beams already has 3, so that one is taken care of. The last 2 factories I want to check on are right out here. So the first one being these copper sheets. And thankfully this one's just right here at the door. So let's go ahead and add one more. Ooh, more nuts. And this one is probably the most important, and I saved it for last because I knew it was probably time to give it a little bit of an update. This big old thing right now is only being used by 1 refinery. Using the wet concrete completely overclocked, one machine can intake 300 limestone and give you 200 concrete. That 200 concrete is then getting split between 4 containers, which then lead into 4 different dimensional depots. Because I did the math and I realized just the small containers on the items that need 500 each, it would take me like an hour of constant using for me to actually start running out. I'm usually limited much more by the actual upload speed more than what I have in storage. So if we head right outside this factory and head down here, Here is the miner. So right now we are working with a Mark II miner. So right there, that's a good sign. And it's not even completely overclocked. This is a pure node, so I could get a full 1200 out of here if I wanted to. I'm not going to do that quite yet. I do think it's time to double this production though. I think it'll be easiest to add it to this side here instead of doing the next one that's kind of more in the middle. Because if I add a third and fourth one, these two will already be joined, and then I can just join those two and then add one more splitter in the very middle. So if I just copy this one and place it here, we've already got the recipe and all the power shards. Now all I need to do is copy this, which I was really hoping I made a blueprint, but I didn't. That's okay, we can just redo it. I mean, I should just make it a blueprint. All right, and so here is my really basic blueprint. I've got 4 of the normal storage containers, and then 4 of the dimensional depot stacked on top of them. You only need Mark III lifts because the max upload speed is 240, so 270 is plenty. And here's the basic load balancing. Since this right here is designed for this factory in mind, there's going to be 200 concrete plugging into this splitter, which will send 100 up here, 100 down here, split each of those in half, so I've got 50 going into all of these storage containers. Not exactly pretty, but it gets the job done. Alright, now I just want to get things lined up as best as I can in here. Make sure this belt only has to go in a straight line. And then I'm just going to set this one up the exact same way so that the initial amount will come in here and then the overflow will go this way. But with this one, what I can do is just slap on a merger. I'm going to replace these. Let's just go ahead and do that now. Now it's got a merger right here, so I can do the same thing, and the overflow will plug into this one, and then now, instead of 200, this is going to have 400, so I need to make sure I get all of this upgraded before it gets backed up. And now the only other thing I need to do is add a splitter up here in the front. But thankfully with the belt already here, I can just kind of nudge it up into the right spot. I'm going to replace it because this belt needs to plug into right here. And now let's just replace this belt all the way around here. And then for now, we'll just leave that one as the only one plugged in. I've got to change the miner and overclock that one, and then I can plug this one in. And you know, I think I may need a little bit more water first. For that, we're just going to line up the pipe hole in the same spot. So right there. Just going to keep on copying pretty much everything. Here on the back side, I just need to add one more water extractor. Unfortunately, it won't line up exactly straight because I didn't get everything spaced out quite even. So it's going to have to do a little bit of a turn here because I think that is lined up. Yeah, our pipe is lined up right here. So that means the pipe is going to be on kind of this quarter mark of the foundation. Which is probably where I should place my pump. So let's just go ahead and place that in the right spot. Horizontal to vertical, plug that in there. And then with straight mode, looks good enough to me. Except for obviously we need to change it to blue because it's water. And because I copied that one, it should already have all of the right settings. I just need to power this on. Same with the pump. Yep, already overclocked to 250. You know, I've got to give past me some credit. It was actually really easy to upgrade this factory. All I need to do now is work with the miner here. So now I can just change this to Mark III. Throw a power shard in there. And now we can get 600. And it'll be ready to completely overclock in the future if I decide to do that. And I just need to connect this belt. And now I've doubled my concrete production and upload speed. And all it took was one more refinery and a water extractor. And it's never going to be that easy again. But I'll take the minor victories where I can get them. This is going to help a lot especially now that I'm at the end game and I'm probably going to start using blueprints a little bit more and spamming down a lot more machines and foundations. I wouldn't be surprised if I come back in not too long and want to double that production for the concrete. But I think everything else is in a pretty good spot. I'm going to hop in my train, head back out to the swamp, and I'm going to finish decorating that coke plant. We'll take a tour, and then we'll get it turned on. Welcome back to my new Petroleum Coke factory. I'm pretty happy with the way these corners came out. So of course, we got to start with the farthest bit, like we always do, and that would be the resource well right here. Like I said, I wanted to switch it up. Instead of having the platform be above it, I decided to go ahead and just clip all of them through the foundations because this is one of the few places where everything is actually pretty level. As you can see, the foundations kind of clip into each one of these at pretty much the exact same spot, which is kind of rare for these things. All 450 crude oil is getting gathered up, and then that just goes in a single pipe that just goes straight into. And then I decided to make these things an X, and then once I did that, I figured, well, now I have to just run the pipe straight through the middle, right? So the pipe goes through the middle, and then it drops down. But we'll go take a look at that in a second. We've just got the battery storage on all four sides, and this is taking me a while, so they're more than halfway charged. So let's go ahead and take a look. So this has added, the charge rate is 4,800, so I'm pretty sure I just added 48. Still not a ton, but if you do this with a bunch of factories, it definitely adds up. I missed the one iron node, so I can still use that for anything in the future. And then if we come right around here, so we've got our entrance. The belts are going to exit this way, and they'll go to the train station. I've got stairs on either side, and then good old glass foundations so that we can still see it. And then as far as in here, not too much changed, except for since I wanted to use the corner right there, I decided to just add a glass foundation in each corner so that you can still get around things. It doesn't clip into anything, and it still lets me see the belt and all the things moving around below it. Because it's a bunch of refineries, and I've got this elevated roof that's got plenty of space, I decided to just use the ramps. So we're just going to funnel all of this smoke into this big square opening. Here's where the polymer resin is, so we've got this half getting grouped up, then getting dropped down to the floor level, and then that heads in, and then a mirrored setup on the other side. And then on this side, not too much has changed. Like I said, we're just having the crude oil just come straight through that middle, and then just drop straight down. So I can replace that window now. The resource well pressurizer is obviously going already, so all of the pipes are filled. I just don't have the machines turned on. The great thing about this factory is I don't even need a stopwatch. We can just watch the entire thing come to life, and I don't think I even need to cut it. Now all I need to do is just make this one random connection, and this will get all of the machines turned on, and this is going to get started ridiculously fast. So here we go. Yep, and just like that, it's already at 100%. And as long as I'm seeing gaps out of each of these machines, that means that it's able to empty everything and nothing's backing up. Since this isn't really all that close to the full 1200 limit of the belt, I'm not really too surprised. Now, let's follow these belts back to the train station. And there we go. Looks like I'm probably going to bounce between 1049 and 1051. Or maybe 4852. But that's not really too surprising. Everything over there is pretty bursty with so few machines putting out 300 each. It's kind of to be expected. So far, so good. And thankfully, I'm still going to be here in the swamp, so I can check on this every once in a while. But I'm pretty confident that this is just going to run smoothly. Petroleum Coke is a really easy factory to build. I now have more petroleum coke than I need. Now it's time to start building the aluminum factory. And I think I'm going to build it just kind of right in this area somewhere. probably going to have to take out this thing. If I have to remove one or two of them, that's fine. I'm going to try to leave some of them in. After my last experiment with the pulse obelisk, well, I had to try some more. And if you were wondering, yeah, you can use gas obelisks to remove those pesky things that even the explosive rebar doesn't remove. Nothing like blowing up gas pillars with gas explosives. Oh, that doesn't work. I guess why am I not surprised? There's just a lot of gas in that area now. Alright, well, they can blow up pretty much everything else, I think. And the really neat thing about the gas obelisk is if you stick it to something, I believe it'll only blow up that thing that you stick it to. So let's try to get it stuck to just this log. And let's see what happens. Look at that. All of the foliage that was still around it, still there. All of these trees are still there. So if you're looking to be really precise with what you're deleting, make yourself some gas obelisks. It'll clear out eventually. But for these, I do like the explosive rebar. Why did that dust cloud go all the way out there? Let me clear out some more of this stuff, get some foundation placed, and we'll start building the main factory. And now I've got some foundations to work on. This right here should be exactly how much space I need for the machines, or at least in one direction. I'll probably have to add on a little bit more to the sides once I do the decorating phase. But for right now, this should be good to work with. I created a new blueprint of fix-it foundations and just a 6x6 grid to make it a little bit easier. And for this bottom floor, I needed 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. So 30 foundations by 12. Like I mentioned before, the bottom floor is going to be for the copper. For this, I decided to use the Pure Copper Ingot. And it's mainly because the next floor is going to take up so much space with all those machines that I might as well use up a huge amount of space on this bottom floor too. I do really like the copper alloy ingot recipe. It takes up a lot less space and power. Since I only have 1800 copper available here in the swamp, using the copper alloy ingot, I could double that amount and I would have 3600 ingots to work with. But if I use the pure copper ingot, I can get 4500. It's a lot more machines and power, but I do get an extra 900 copper ingots out of this. Now if we take a refinery and we pick the pure copper recipe, the biggest downside in my mind for this machine is the fact that the rates are just so low, and that's why you need so many machines. At 100%, I would need 120 copper ingots. But if I fully overclock these, I can reduce it down to only needing 48, which is still a lot, but a whole lot better. With the power shards, I can bring the number down to 48 machines. And then the inputs are 1800 copper and 1200 water. I think it'll be easiest if I split it in half, so 24 on one side, 24 on the other side. Each side will require 900 copper ore, which all fits on one belt, and 600 water, which all fits in one pipe. So I'm going to have all of the inputs facing the middle, because on the output side, since I'm making 4500 ingots, best I can do is group it all into 4 belts, and then each one will have 1125 on it. And if I need 24 on each side, I think that is a perfect time to use a blueprint. So pretty basic. Let me place one here and I'll show you. This right here is the middle line, and this floor right here is gonna get kind of packed, I'm not gonna lie. I am going to leave just enough space for one belt to fit right down the middle. But I also need to make sure I spin this around. Inputs are on this side, and now I've got just enough space for one belt. That's all I'm gonna need. We'll get this right up on the edge, and like I said, I'll add some more later so I can actually walk around this whole factory. So let's place one, and let me go over the blueprint. We take a look at the machine here. It's fully overclocked, and then for the inputs, we've got them balanced right here. I am gonna go vertical with my load balancing, because normally to load balance something 24 times, you'd have your initial belt, and that would get split into 3s. You go from 1, you'd split it 3 ways. Each one of these you would split twice. And then each one of those you would split twice. I'm just gonna pretend that's enough. But basically, you're gonna end up, even if you were to put it right next to each other, you would need these to go 4 deep. And if you only do them going this way, yeah, load balancing will take up a lot of space. And this is still gonna take up a decent amount of space, but I can also go vertically, because I really wasn't gonna put anything there anyways. So I'll show you how that gets put together, but the ones on the very end for the pipes at least, I can just remove this one. And if I put it in horizontal to vertical, I can just place that right there. And on this side, I just decided to do the same thing, just because I like the way that it looks. I could have easily just done a manifold, but it's kind of fun to switch it up every once in a while. And if you're blueprinting them, it really makes it a whole lot easier. So let me go ahead and put this in blueprint mode. Press T to remove all those. Comes right to the edge, just like I planned. There's the first 24. And now I can spin this one around. Press H to lock it. And let's nudge it into the right spot. Just enough room for the belt. Got the inputs on this side. Everything looks good. You gotta love blueprints. So like I said, the 4 machines at the very end, I can just redo that because I really don't need that junction. And because I used a Mark III blueprinter, there was enough room. I could have added a little bit of extra pipe right here and used the auto connect. But this is such a short distance, I would rather this be 1 pipe instead of 3 separate pipes. I don't really know if that makes any difference with the flow rate or the object limit or anything. But I really don't mind having to place a couple of these pipes, so I'm willing to do it. All the pipes are connected. Now I've got 6 groups of 4 to kind of all bring together. So I'm going to pair them up. So I'm just going to grab another splitter. Going to find the middle spot between the 2. I'm going to get it lined up with all the rest of the splitters. And then using page up, bring it to the same height that I've left these lifts that are open right there. So that's going to plug in there. And what I can do is just place another one right on top of it also. Alright, so let's work backwards. Each of these machines need 37.5, so that's Mark 1 here. This one needs to be a Mark 2. This is 75. That means this one is 150, so it's a Mark 3. So we're just going to plug Mark 3 belts into here. Which means I need to plug 300 into here. So I'm going to use a Mark 4. Place that one there, and just delete the splitter. And I can do that with the next one here. Except for this one, I'm going to leave the splitter, and I'm going to leave the opening on this side. Let me do this last pair on this side, and I'll show you how it all comes together. So now I have 3 groups of 8. Each one needs 300, so I'm going to take a Mark 4, and this is going to get plugged into that one. And it can't reach all the way, but thankfully belts are easy to work with, and I can actually raise this up all the way to the right height. And that's going to plug into here. And then I'm going to do the same thing with this one. So now we have 300, 300, and 300 for this set. So there is my 900. And to get that plugged in, I'm going to place one more splitter on top. This one needs a Mark 6 lift. And this is why I left exactly enough space for one belt to fit. Because that's where it's going to feed in. And it's going to go up into this lift. Plug straight into there. And then load balance across all 24 refineries. Oh, except for I'll line that up a little bit better. Although, now that I'm looking at it, I think this one actually faces the other way. So yeah, this one is going to be the one that comes from this side. And then this one is actually going to be the one that comes from this side. There's going to be one belt of 900 copper that feeds in this way. And then one that feeds in from the other side. And that way one belt will feed one side, and then the other belt will feed the other side of refineries. And that is how I'm going to load balance all 1800 across 48 refineries. For the outputs, I need to put them onto 4 belts, and since I have 48 machines, I just need to group up 12, which would be 1/2 of these. So I'm going to do the same thing I did on that side. I am just going to go vertical just because I can. And then that way it'll group these three together. And then I'll have 1125 and then the same thing on that side. And then mirrored on the other half of the factory. And that'll give me my 4 belts. So it is a lot of machines, but I really don't think it's that bad. Now we get to add the next floor. I think I'll probably give it the full 10 foundations of a gap, and that way I don't have to worry about these smokestacks. Since there's only 2 floors, the only thing I really have to worry about is if I'm going to need a second pump for the water to get up there. Let me place some more foundations, and then we'll get working on the aluminum. And now I have a whole bunch of more foundations. This floor got a little bit bigger, so it overhangs by 3 foundations on either side. I don't actually need quite that much extra space, but it was easier just to kind of switch things up. So now I have, I think 6, 3, 4, 5, and 6. So it's 36 foundations by 12. So with this floor, I'll place them in the middle and work my way out. But let's go over the fun blueprint I came up with. This right here is the blueprint that I created for my first aluminum factory. And part of the reason was I was limited to Mark II, and so trying to fit everything in one blueprint was going to be just kind of hard. You could definitely do it. I just decided to make it 2 different blueprints, one to stack on top of the other instead. Now that I have the Mark III blueprint designer, I want to see if I can just fit everything in one blueprint. So I'm not going to go vertical. I'm just not going to have any of this stuff, which was a lot of the blueprint, but I do really like this setup. It's very basic. They just feed into each other, so kind of similar to the plastic and rubber endless loop that I make. This first refinery intakes 300 bauxite and 300 water and creates 360 alumina solution. I love the sloppy alumina alternate because it cuts out all that silica. I could definitely do this whole thing with less machines. However, when you're dealing with byproduct and having to cycle stuff back, or at least that's the way I'm going about it, you could definitely just input all the water this needs, and then with the byproduct water, just create something else. I could have had all that byproduct water go downstairs and feed some of the copper if I really wanted to. And that's a great way to deal with it. Once you get the hang of looping back the water, it just becomes really nice to just have to bring up less. Even though I'm not fully overclocking things, I'm overclocking them to a point where all the numbers are going to be really convenient to work with. 300 bauxite, you just really can't get any better than that because an impure node is 300, a normal is 600, or a pure is 1200. The 360 alumina solution is just going to go from this pipe into this machine, which is going to take exactly 360 alumina solution. I'm going to need to input 120 petroleum coke, and that is going to spit out 600 aluminum scrap and a byproduct of 210 water. That byproduct water is just going to go straight into this machine. And by placing the junction this way, it'll prioritize this pipe over the fresh water that's coming from the water extractor, which is going to get plugged in right on top. Using this method, let me show you the new blueprint I came up with. And now I've squeezed in all the smelters I needed. Just enough space over here. We've got the same 2 refineries. These are clocked exactly the same as the previous ones. But because they needed to be facing opposite directions, that meant that the input for bauxite and the output for scrap are facing next to each other. As we've already gone over, the load balancing for the bauxite side of things is going to be super easy, and I just don't really have to worry too much about that. I already have this set up to make it even easier to plug into the water. The output scrap is just going to come right along here, and to save the most amount of space, I just went up and over this other lift. Using some verticality, we're just load balancing across the 4 smelters. Each one of these is completely overclocked. They'll intake 150 scrap and give me 75 aluminum ingots. This belt will have 600 scrap going into the smelters, and then on this side, this lift will be outputting 300 aluminum ingots. My goal was to make it fairly compact and see if I could fit all of this in the Mark III blueprinter, and really you could double this up. I could have built this farther over to the side, and then I could have had 2 of these setups right next to each other, which is not a bad idea. And I did think about changing it, because normally what you can do is grab a blueprint. This is my aluminum setup too, and then I could just place 2 of them inside the blueprinter next to each other. And so what I realized is it's the beams because I'm using those to run the power. So what I could do is just lift this up by a meter. I could place 2 of them and then I would just have to nudge each one of the blueprints down by a meter. So it's really just a personal preference. Would you rather place few of them but have to nudge each one, or would you rather just be able to spam them all and not have to worry about nudging? I went with the spamming option. Let's find our center point. So this right here is our center line. And for this, I'm going to have the inputs come in from this way, mainly because, well, the water is going to be out there. Belts are much more flexible, so if I have to take belts going all the way around the factory to plug in here, I would much rather do that than have the pipes have to go all the way around and into it. Where I can, I like to try to keep the pipes as short as possible. Alright, so this right here is the center line, so now let's work on the spacing. I guess we can get this just right in the middle. Now I've got 3 foundations on this side, 3 foundations on this side. Looks good to me. And for this, I need 10 of these blueprints. So this one and 4 more on this half. And I can come to this side and I just need 5. Beautiful. I guess these actually fit in pretty much the same amount of space. For some reason I thought this was going to take up just a touch more. That's alright, I knew the factory was going to get a little bit bigger. I do like to be able to walk around a little bit. Alright, so let's do a little bit of belt and pipe work. I'm going to work on the load balancing for the bauxite later, mainly because it's just going to be really easy. It's probably going to be 2 full belts of 1200, so that would be 4 of these grouped together. And then 1 group of 2 is probably going to be the easiest way to do it. Or if I bring in belts of 900, then it'll be groups of 3 and then a single one left out. I don't know. I'll figure that part out later. No matter how I do it, it's going to be pretty easy. For the pipes, I could do it a couple different ways. This right here would be the easy way, would be just to connect the 2. And then just slap the junction down here in the middle. But I think what I'm going to do is place this down on here on the side. And then I'm just going to elevate this one. And they're going to go out a little bit farther. But that's okay. Let's delete that one. Put this in straight mode. Connect one to either side. There's a lot of different ways I could do this. By far the easiest solution here would be to just bring in 2 pipes, each one with 450 water. And that would be enough for 5 of the blueprints. So half of the floor, and then the other pipe would feed the other half of the floor. And if I were you making this sort of a factory, that's probably the route I would go. I'm not going to go that route. Instead, I'm going to do 5 pipes, and each one is only going to feed 2 of these machines. And I'll be honest, I don't really have a good reason for doing it that way. The input side is going to be pretty easy. This side is where it gets a little bit more complicated. And that's because when I was building the factory, I knew about one part, but then I kind of forgot about it at the same time. And that's the Petroleum Coke. I'm going to group them up so they're in pairs, and then I'll have 5 pairs. And then I have to do the 5-way split with the full 1200 belt. When I originally did this, I actually just kind of nudged everything into the right spot and just did this entire thing while it was floating in the air, which definitely works. But for you guys, I think I'm going to make this a little bit easier. And I'm going to do Old Faithful and just place a whole bunch of temporary foundations, because then it'll be a little bit easier to see without having that mess of smelters right below all the belts. Don't worry, I'm going to delete these before I turn these smelters on. But hopefully this will make things a little bit easier to follow. Now I've got all the lifts poking up in place. Now I just need a bunch of splitters in between them all. I have 5 sets of 2, and I need to plug in 240 into each of these splitters. And hopefully this helps out a little bit. I was actually struggling to find words on how to describe this for some reason. I've done something like this so many times. So I went back to the drawing board, literally, and I came up with another diagram to help me explain all of this. Because I'll be honest, I took screenshots of what I did, and then when I was going back, I was like, how does this actually work? It does work. It just took me a second to realize what in the world I did. I normally build all of my 5-way splits pretty much the same way, where you start with a merger, And then you've got a splitter. That is going to split it in half. And then I've got another splitter and another splitter. So the merger goes into the splitter. Splitter splits it in half. With one half, we're going to use all three outputs. The other half, well, we're going to use all three, but one of them is going to loop back to the merger. And in some fashion, this is more or less what all of my 5-way splits have looked like. And this was one of the first factories where I realized I could do things differently. Because at the end of the day, when you're doing any of the prime splits, what you're doing is you're splitting it in a higher number than you need, and you're looping back that extra bit. So with a 5-way split, the most common way is to split it 6 ways and loop back 1. You could split it 8 ways and loop back 3 if you really wanted to. But with that in mind, there's actually 2 ways to do a 6-way split. It's just most of the time, it makes sense to do the split in half, and then each one of these split it 3 ways. But what I really could do is split this very first one 3 ways, and then have one of those split in half, and then loop back. And that is what I'm doing with this one. So let me show you. Let's see, so 1, 2, 3, so right here, I think, let's see, yeah, as far as the blueprints go, right here is the very middle of the factory. So let's just, for right now, the initial 1200 is going to come in here, and then we're going to split that in half. So 600 is going to come over here, and then we're going to plug into a merger first, and then a splitter here. So I've got 600, and that's going to plug into this one. I already know I'm doing the 5-way split, so this is going to be 120% of what this belt is, which means this is going to be 720. With this right here, I'm going to split it all 3 ways. So if I take 720 and I split it into thirds, I've got 240, 240, and then this 240 I'm going to split in half. So let me just get the splitter in place. 240. So we split in half, and there's the 120 that I needed to loop back. So this right here is a 5-way split. It's just done differently than I normally do, and it's because I grouped up these machines. So now I've got 120 coming out of here. From here, I've got a couple options. I'm going to do the exact same mirrored setup on this half. So I'll have an extra 120 line coming out here. I can have them just meet right here in the middle and just place a merger. But at the same time, that seems kind of silly to have them merge just for like 2 meters and then split up again. So why don't we just delete these and we'll replace these lifts. Let's get that spun around. And now I can just have that 120 just plug straight into this one machine. And then I'll do the same thing on this side. And so that is how I'm going to take a full 1200 belt of petroleum coke and split it across the 10 refineries. And then once I get rid of these foundations here, just going to add a little bit to the craziness. And since most of these are built just like right on top of the smelters, they actually look somewhat supported. There is going to be a lot of stuff moving around on this floor. With all of the belts in place, this is what it looks like now. Grouping together the outputs was pretty easy. This merger right here has the 300 coming out of here, so I just have a small lift, bringing that up and over, grouping 2 of them together. So here is 600, and then grouping that 600 with another 600, and here is going to be a full 1200 belt. Now they have made improvements to the mergers and whatnot, and so I think in most cases you can merge together and get a full belt of the 1200, and it really shouldn't be too much of a problem. I'm sure you can probably find some scenarios where it's not quite as easy, or you may need the priority merger. But if all else fails, this right here will pretty much always work. If you can get it so you have exactly 600 on 2 belts and you merge those together, even in the past I didn't have an issue. This system works out well. I'll have a 1200 belt here. The very middle is going to be the small belt, and this one's only going to be 600. And then here's another 1200. And that's the 3000 aluminum ingots. I just need to plug that initial belt of petroleum coke right here. And because this one was kind of out in the middle of nowhere, this one I decided to support with some pillars. The rest of them are just kind of floating above the smelters. But I don't really mind. I think it's going to look really cool with just so many things moving around on all these belts. Instead of the 2 that I could be using, I decided to downgrade these to just the Mark 1 pipes. So the next step is the water extractors, and I'm going to build those just right out here. Thankfully, the pipes don't have to be long because pretty much as soon as you clear the ground, you can place the water extractors here. And then I'll just need some short pipes. And I think I'll probably center them on this side of the copper ore. And then they'll just have a real short trip to go into the factory there. I need 5 belts of 180 up top. And then I need 2 completely full belts of 600 down here at the bottom. Laying out the water extractors really isn't anything too special, so I decided to just skip ahead. But I'm happy with the way it all came out. And I laid it out this way for a particular reason. Now I've got the 5 pipes that are going upstairs right in the very middle, and then the 2 completely full pipes that are staying on the first floor, and the 2 completely full pipes are on the outside. So if we just come right around here, we just follow this. This is where they will enter the factory. So the 5 pipes will come up here, and then they just go off into their own sections, and I clearly forgot one. There to there. Okay, so now they're all in. Now I've got my 5 pipes going where they're supposed to go. And then for the bottom pipes, one goes to the right, the other one goes here to the left. It will come around, but then it just comes over to the appropriate side. The other pipe feeds this half of the refineries. This pipe feeds this half. So if we come to the very center, you can see where they plug in. It just goes up and over and then plugs down into the very center. And then we've got our 2 belts. That'll be 900. This will be 900. They're merged together in groups of 12. So coming out of here will be the 1,125 copper ingots. And then we've got 1 more on that side. And then 2 on the other half of the factory. Even with as tall as the factory is, I only need 1 pump, even for that top floor. They're going to get close. I think it's going to end up hitting 48, maybe even close to 50. But it will be within the limit, and I don't need to add a second pump. Before I really buckle down and do the final touches and start doing all the decorating, I think there's one last major piece I kind of want to knock out first, and that's going to be the bus. Obviously, these 3 bauxite, that copper, the petroleum coke is pretty close. But there's still this copper node, and then those 2 bauxite nodes way over there that I should probably take care of. They are going to go on a bit of a journey, but now that I have Mark 6 belts, they can all fit on 1 belt, and it moves pretty quickly. So I think I'll probably just slap a merger just right in front of this one right here. I'll have that belt come around here, plug into there, and then the way I do my little belt bus highway things is I just lay down a whole bunch of foundations to kind of map out where it's going to go. So for this one, I think we could just have it come out to like here probably. And then I'm going to drop it down. And actually, maybe I want it to go 1 farther so it misses this cliff. This way I can figure out where the belt is going to go. The obvious ones I can just clear out ahead of time, but the ones that may be close, I'll run the belt and see if it's clipping through or not. And then I just take whichever blueprint I'm going to use. And I know belts can only stretch 7 foundations. So in a spot like this, I know I'm going to have a lift that comes down. And then I can go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Well, with the lift, they're kind of weird because they have to go inside the lift a little bit. So it would probably be just shy of 7. So right here would be fine. And then what I do is I just nudge it down the 4 meters and then I place it. And then I can go 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 to the next spot. I know that's how far it can reach. Hit H, nudge it down. So I'll go through and I'll get all of these placed. And then I can come back and I place the belt. And then I can just delete the foundations. And there it goes. And now it makes it really easy to run power from my train station all the way out here, and it keeps it fairly hidden right underneath the belt. Especially because of where this is at, I think it's going to be easiest just to have this go in a straight line all the way to the train station. Same thing with this copper here. I think I'm going to spin this around and it's going to go into the train station. I could easily just have it be out here on the outside, but since the train station's right here and I'm going to have a number of things coming from here going into the factory, it just makes sense to group that up with one of them. And that way I don't need my belt support blueprint or anything. I can just kind of belt them on the edge here. And then I think everything that's going to and from the train station will probably just fit right through this gap right here. Does mean I'm going to have to kill that one tree, but, well, it's the swamp, and I care a lot less here. And there's going to be a few belts, because just the outgoing belts, I'm going to have 4 belts of copper down here, and 3 belts of aluminum from up here. So I've got 7 belts that I can't compress anymore, and those are all going to come this way. But before I get to that, let me try to polish that up a little bit. A lot of the belts are placed now, so let me show you. The farther one is the impure, so that one's going to have 300. That'll meet up with the normal node with 600, and we've got a line of 900 going this way. That comes to this point, we drop down with the lift, and then I just surrounded it with the big frame pillars. And it heads off this way, and I try to keep it nice and low, but I had to get up and over this part. And then I drop it back down to the same level as the train station. That just heads on into here. Oh no, spiders, leave me alone. And then it's just going to go around the outside, and then that way if I need to do any load balancing for the actual trains, hopefully it's not in the way and I won't have to move it. I did decide to flip this minor 180, so now it's facing this way. It just goes around and into the train station. It joins up with that bauxite, and they just head right here along the outside. I gave myself a little over a half a foundation of space, and that way if I need any other nodes or something else to plug into the train station, hopefully that'll give me enough space to use a lift to get it up and over the belts and get it to wherever it needs to go. And then we get to this point, where we've got quite a few more belts. Here is the tiny bit of load balancing I needed to do. Because this is a full 1200 belt of copper ore, and I only need 900 on both sides, we're taking the 1200 line, split it in half, so 600 then gets split in half again. Here's 300, this 300 gets grouped up with the 600, and now I've got 900 going that way. This 300 line is going to go right along the bottom into the main part of the factory. It's going to go to the left here into this merger, and it is going to group up with the 600 from that normal node. The other 900 is going to go around and then plug in from the other side. This belt right here is the Petroleum Coke, so let's follow this back. And here's the tiny bit of load balancing for this. Like with most of these things, there's a number of different ways I could have gone about it, but this is the one that I went with. So the belt initially goes into a smart splitter. Right now, it's just at its default setting. What I am going to change this to is petroleum coke to the right and polymer resin forward. For this side anyways. So the resin will continue up to the lift. All of the petroleum coke will go into this one, which is 900. Using all 3 of the outputs, we'll have 300, 300, and 300. 300 will go back into this merger, continue on with the resin and get sunk. The other 600 gets grouped together, and then head on into this merger, and then I have a mirrored setup on this side. So I'll have a 600 belt and a 600 belt, and then I have a throughput monitor to make sure that I get my full 1200, because I'll get this turned on a little bit sooner, and I'll probably just add one more sink down here. I definitely want to make sure that that's working and there's no hangups here. Alright, so for this little belt highway thing, there wasn't a ton of space unless I wanted to go up and over these rocks right here. And same thing on this side. So I pretty much just had the 2 full foundations. I probably could have squeezed in a half foundation if I really wanted to, but I thought it would just be easier to work with just 2 full foundations. So the bottom floor is going to be all of my inputs, and then the top floor is all of the outputs coming this way. So here on the bottom, we have them mainly on the outsides, and then the bauxite from right here is just going to plug into the middle. I think I'll probably want to add some wall holes here just to kind of make things look a little bit more normal. There we go. So for here, we've got a line of, I think this one's 1200. Yep. So here's a line of 1200 bauxite. And then this right here, we've got 600 and 300. And the other belt of bauxite is also 900. So 2 belts of 900 and 1 of 1200. Got all of those incoming belts just coming along here. And then now they enter the factory and go off where they're supposed to. For the copper, they're staying on this floor. And of course, I decided to use the exact same color for bauxite. I just used the copper belts just because I like the way they look. So it makes it a little bit harder to tell what's what. But I'm pretty sure this very first one is the copper. And then these 3 are the bauxite, but let's follow these around. And yep, I was right. So the very inside one peels off and then feeds 1/2 of all of these refineries. These 3 are the bauxite, and they head all the way back to where all the pipes are going up. Decided to bring these up right here. Since these were already having to get lifted up and go over, it would be a convenient place to bring up the lifts as well. I've got one belt of 900 that then gets split in between 3 refineries. The other outside belt is the 900, and that splits those 3 refineries. And then the middle one is the 1200, so then that gets split in half, and then split in half again to feed those middle 4. And then with the outputs, I decided to just keep these up on this level, because I've got so many belts going everywhere, might as well add more verticality. This will be 1,125 ingots. Swings around here, meets up with this one, and then there's the 2 from the other side. And then in the very middle is where I'm bringing down all of the aluminum ingots. The 2 outside ones will both be 1200, the middle one 600. And then I'll just need to set up some sinks to take care of all this. Most of this belt work was already done, I just needed a couple lifts and a couple belts to connect them. And that right there is the large majority of the work. I need to run power throughout the whole thing, but I built it in with the beams on the bottom, and so connecting everything should be pretty quick and easy. And then I'm going to spend way too much time doing decorating. The save is currently at 300 hours and 29 minutes. Let's see where it's at when I get back. Welcome back. The save is now at 305 hours and 42 minutes. Let's go on a little tour. The train station isn't complete. Not sure if I need a roof or a second story of train stations yet, but a lot of it is taken care of now. And I learned that the patterns work on the corner pieces. I have so many hours in this game and I'd never once tried this, but they actually work really kind of interesting. So you can still rotate it. So if I wanted the full pattern, it would be like that. At the half, you can rotate it around and that's what it looks like. Or you've got the quarter. Those are the only 2 spots you get, I guess. Or the line. So yeah, you can play around with the different patterns, and on some of these pieces, it's kind of interesting. Since the swamp kind of mutes the colors, it's better than it used to be, but they're still just a little bit more dull than any other biome. A lot of the factories are just gray or white, and then over here I decided, you know what, let's use the good old fix-it orange. I've got plenty of space to work with down here, and I've got 7 sinks set up for all of my outputs. Since I have enough room to place them all down here, I just figured that would be easiest. I've got my bauxite and copper running already, so when I'm ready to start it, I just delete the smart splitters and the belt, and that'll get sent on into the factory. I have enough room in here for probably another 2 trains, and unfortunately I don't think I have quite enough room for a 3rd one. But right now, I don't see myself needing it, because I already have plans for a large majority of this aluminum, and it's actually going to stay right here in the swamp. But that's for the next video. So I think I'll be able to keep this train station at the size it's at. For the entrance and exit, I just made these little holes using the inverted and the normal ramp walls. This opening is 3 foundations tall, but these are each 2 foundations, so they're basically just overlapping over this middle part right here. And that's what creates that pattern for me. Before we look at the main factory, here's the other satellite part of it. I went with just a lot of the ramp foundations to give it this look. Using just the normal full frame windows. I was going to leave this more open, but then I realized that it's the swamp and I don't want dangerous spiders getting stuck in here. Although I guess they can probably jump in from the top. But we're going to pretend that's not going to happen. And because of all those dangerous critters, I thought it would be safest if I just stuck to a hyper tube. So I can go from a hyper tube from the main factory out here to the water. I went with my little tiered roof again. The hyper tube just leads you right out here on top of all of the pipes, so you can kind of check everything out. It's really nothing special. It's just housing for 9 water extractors. But out of all the different ones I've built, I think I like this one the best so far. And now we're on to the main factory. As I'm sure you probably could guess, these are definitely blueprints. I figured 2 of them stacked tall enough would be a good window section. And then once I started placing them, I realized I needed to fill this gap kind of in between. And so I deleted everything to where I just had a single piece and just the single battery. Right here is where the foundations are. And then since I usually like to raise my walkways a little bit higher and then have them at the same level as my windows, this kind of takes up that whole area, and just putting another power storage just kind of made sense to me. So same thing here at the bottom. This part is all the blueprint, but instead of all of this being concrete down here, I thought it would be nice if just the batteries ran all the way to the ground. And that helps break it up so it's not just a huge flat surface down here at the bottom. And it's taken me long enough to build everything that they're all completely charged. Finally starting to use a decent amount of the power. I'm almost halfway. Now if we look at my storage charge, we're up to almost 19,000. And that is a lot better than it used to be just a few videos ago. Thankfully the power grid really isn't spiking too much yet, but just having more of this just gives you that peace of mind. And again, I went with the tiered roof. Now the funny thing with up here is I was going to do the same thing I normally do and place my signs all the way around the edge to give it that kind of cool lighting effect. But once you get a bit of a distance away, if you do that all the way across, with the really bright white foundations, I couldn't really tell where the foundation ended and the light started. So I figured that was just going to be a huge waste of both the quartz crystal and just objects in the game that you really couldn't even tell were there. We come here to the front, I've got 2 entrances. So the good old ground entrance with lots of stairs everywhere, and it's got its own roll-up gate. And then the entrance that I would probably actually use, the good old hypertube. That just snakes underneath everything, and I've got both the elevator to take me down to the logistics floor, and 2 hypertubes. So I did add a second hypertube to go over here. Because I already had these pillars, I would have liked to center this in the very middle, but the way I laid all of this out, it wasn't going to look pretty. Because if I try to, say, like continue this thing up and then mount the hypertube above it, well, that clips through the belt. Doesn't clip through any of the items, but I don't really like how much it clips. So I just went with this side, and it just snakes all the way around and into that factory. On this side, it was pretty easy because I could just do a line of the small frame pillars from that wall to this wall, and that just looks like plenty of support for my hypertube to run right across everything. And here is a cool trick that I learned. The buffer stops have multiple uses. Let me go to the other side and I'll turn fly off and I'll show you. Alright, so you have to turn fly off because when you use a hypertube with the fly mod on, you stop like as soon as you exit the hypertube, and it doesn't like suck you back in like it would normally. So when you have it turned off, I can jump in the hypertube. And then when I exit, I just stop right on the buffer. And even though I'm right next to the hypertube, it doesn't suck me back in. But you can easily just run back into it. And it works like a charm. So if you're using hypertubes in your world and you're tired of these things just either shooting you out really far, or as soon as you come out of one, you end up getting sucked back into the same one or a different one, you could try playing around with the buffer stops. I just have this, let's see how far down it is. It looks like I just nudged it 1 meter down. Now let's head into the factory. And I just used the glass foundations all around the edge. And thankfully, there's not too much just right along the edge. I've got my elevator here in the middle. And I did my usual of using the gate hole walls because that gives me something to actually connect my wall outlets to. Only 2 floors. We've got the copper floor and the aluminum floor. With the walkway, I can get all the way around. Got a nice view right down the middle of all the inputs. And then on this side, because I couldn't have it go all the way out and around, it's going to clip into machines if I add one more. Best thing I could really come up with was just using some wall holes. So, but I don't think it looks too bad. And then tucked here in the back is the hyper tube to take you to the water extractors. And then you just get to go face first into a bunch of water pipes when you come back. So now we can take the elevator to the top floor. Besides adding the roof and the walls, not too much has changed on this floor as far as the machines and everything go. Even though I didn't add the strip of light around on the outside, I still have it on the inside. I think it adds a nice little touch. And this floor ended up with just a little bit of extra space, so I guess technically I could have brought in the factory by 1 or 2 foundations and had this second floor be a little bit smaller. But it wasn't going to be a whole lot smaller, and so I thought it was just easier if I kept it all the same. And I spent so much time on these blueprints that I kind of wanted to use them. And if I made the second floor a little bit smaller, on some of the sides, these just wouldn't line up very well, and I don't know if I'd be able to make it look good. So it is just kind of a giant box, but it's a box with a whole bunch of batteries on the outside. Now we get to watch this beautiful monstrosity come to life. Because the 2 floors are completely separate processes that have nothing to do with each other, I'm going to do them one at a time just so I can watch the whole thing come to life. I'm going to start with the copper. Once it's at 100%, then I'll go ahead and start the aluminum. The copper is coming from 2 nodes. I'm going to start by turning this one on, then I'll go to the front of the factory and delete that smart splitter and get that one sent in. And let's go ahead and start the stopwatch. And there we go. I'm getting 1125, or plus or minus 4 or 5 it looks like, on all 4 of the belts. I have more throughput monitors on the inside of the train station, but it's also nice to have them out here. Unfortunately, 1125 is just going to be one of those numbers, especially because the machines are just so bursty. I'll keep an eye on this, but so far, it's looking good. Let's go ahead and get the aluminum going. For the aluminum, there's 3 things I need to do. I need to make this power connection and get these 3 miners all turned on. Then I need to delete that smart splitter and awesome sink. And also the one for the Petroleum Coke. Since the miners take the longest to start up, let's go ahead and start here. Now that those are started, we can send this one in. And last but not least, the Petroleum Coke. And I think the aluminum got up to 100% faster than the copper did. And with these numbers, I'm reading pretty much exactly what I'm supposed to. Somehow that's more than 600, which doesn't seem possible. But I guess more is better than being short. And it's factories like this that I really love doing the load balancing for. Just sitting here and watching this is fun to me. And that right there is 4,500 copper ingots and 3,000 more aluminum ingots. And when I come out here to the front, oh, it looks great. Part of me wishes the incoming belts were a little bit more visible, but at the same time, really it's the finished product that I want to see. And if I come inside the train station, I've got a nice view of all of the belts and all of the amounts. And we are looking good. When I started the video, there was nothing out here in the swamp. I feel like I've made a pretty good dent. The next video is also going to be taking place out here in the swamp. But I think part of the project is also going to take place out in the dune desert. As of right now, this is as close as my train lines get. Thankfully, that line right there cuts through the Titan forest and has already completed the loop. And so most trains are already going to be taking that. Even when I complete this, that's just going to be a shorter path for most trains. But before I end this video, I want to do a little bit more work on my train line just to prepare for the next video. Because I have a feeling the next one is going to be a little bit longer than this one is. So I think the pass should be pretty easy. I'm just going to need to ramp that one up a little bit, and then it's going to snake through here. From this side, I'll have it curve down through here. Now there's a couple openings, or I could just go up and over a lot of these rocks to send my train line out here into the dune desert. But I think I'm going to add the intersection probably right through here, because this is definitely a big enough gap that I can fit the train line through. Oh good, I need more slugs. Let me lay out a few more train tracks and I'll show you what it looks like. And just like that, the two lines are connected. The distance really wasn't too far, and lots of it got to be straight, so it was pretty quick and easy to do. Just added a three-way intersection here, and then I needed to start ramping up, and I think it can probably stay at this elevation for a little while. What I'll probably do is have this go straight out a little bit farther, get out of photo mode. You can see the compass here at the top. But normally, I would probably aim it like this way. But if I aim it actually north and probably aim for right over in that direction, if I take a look at the map, I think having it run just straight for a while, I think I might even have more than one train station out here. I still haven't decided exactly what I'm going to put out here, although I do have plans for a couple things. There is just so many resources, I can probably fit quite a bit. And that is going to do it for this one. Thank you so much for being here. And a special thank you to those that like, comment, share, and even hype the videos. It really does help the channel, so thank you very much. I now have the bulk of the basic items I'm going to need in the near future. In the next video, I'll be staying out in the swamp and using more than 80% of the aluminum I just made. I'm going to be making all the pressure conversion cubes I'm going to need for the rest of the playthrough. Look forward to that, and thanks for watching.